record. There we go. Okay. All right. Other ideas or thoughts? Why is it important for us to assess our team's effectiveness?
The goal of the effective PLC should be continuous improvement, so we can always become more and more effective.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, Dr. Perry and I were talking the other day about how do you motivate and move a staff. And I remember when I was a principal, our school was if you're from Texas, you get labels like your needs improvement, you were acceptable, you were a recognized campus, or you were an exemplary campus. And my school was recognized, which, is really good, but we were pushing very hard to get to exemplary. And, it kind of hit me one day. I said to my teachers, in a way, I hope we never meet that exemplary status, because if we do, everybody's going to think we've arrived. And so we're not going to be pushing all the time for that continuous improvement. And if you don't take time to stop and look and see how your PLC is doing and use some sort of a tool to assess whether or not what you're doing is effective, then you can think, oh, this is great, we're exactly where we need to be. But in reality, an effective PLC is constantly changing and growing and improving. Just like Joseph said, and I think Jim said the same thing, you've got to know where you are, but you also have to have a clear picture of where you're going. And quite honestly, I like very much that team assessment that they use in the Five Dysfunctions book, because I think it does get to those critical and important points. So thinking about that piece of it, guys, how often do you think you would need to assess or look at how effective your PLC is? Is it a one and done thing, or is it something that you feel like you need to do more frequently?
I would say like every few weeks.
Okay. Yeah. Every few weeks. Okay. Other ideas?
I put like once a semester.
Okay.
Just because I know like day to day there's a lot going on, but taking one intentional like PLC a semester to revisit that might be a good time without it being like overwhelming.
Okay. Okay.
I also think maybe whenever you have new people join or someone leaves, so there's a different dynamic, you might want to revisit.
Okay. Excellent. Other ideas?
I think a lot can depend on how you're measuring the effectiveness, like what goals you're trying to attain. Some things may require a quarterly or semesterly assessment, and some things might be something you could really only truly measure on an annual basis.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Well, guys, the good news is that you're all right. Bad news is there's no hard and fast answer. It really does depend on your team. So I'll kind of go back to what Joseph said, and I think, Melissa also brought up as well. A lot of it depends on your goals. The one thing that I would caution you about, though, is do not do it just one time a year at the end of the year, because that's, basically the year's done. It's historical data at that point. There's not a lot that you can do with it. And also, it's sort of like with teachers and schools, we get ready for the big state assessments, and, we kind of pray along the way. We don't know whether we're going to do great or whether our kids are not going to do so well. You have to make sure that you're benchmarking along the way. If it's a fairly stable group, you might be able to get away with once a semester or once every 9 or 10 weeks. Like Vicki said, if you get new people joining the group, then it's time to renorm. It's time to refocus, and then you probably do want to assess a little more quickly than you might with a group that's been together for a long time. So, like I said, I wish I could give you this, you must always do this, but it doesn't work that way. We're dealing with human beings and all of the great things that humans bring to teams, but also the baggage they bring along with them. So you have to really kind of think about, what is the right time to do this? What are our goals? And how are we going to decide what effectiveness looks like? So let's assume that, you've assessed your team and you now have some results. How do you use that data? What are you going to do with that information?
Evaluate processes and make change as necessary, depending on, again, where we are and whether we're meeting our goals or not, or whether our students are meeting their goals or not.
Okay. Now we're talking about team effectiveness. Okay. So how How else might you use it? Yeah, part of it depends on if you're meeting your goals. You're the team leader. What are you going to do with data?
Want to play to our strengths and work on our weaknesses, and if wherever possible, use our strengths to help support the weaknesses.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. That's a good point. Any other ideas? You know, one of the things that we are really, really good at anymore in education is we generate lots and lots and lots of data. You know, I know when I was, you know, working in the school systems, you know, gosh, it just felt like sometimes the data was overwhelming. You know, we had data about how many absences a particular student had, how many discipline referrals. You know, we could track their student achievement from the time they were in pre-K all the way through the time they graduated. Lots and lots of data. And while that's all well and good, you have to be a smart consumer of that data and information. And when you're looking at and assessing your team and you get all this data and information, guys, you cannot just sit on it as a team leader or as an administrator or as a department chair or anything like that. Data is only as good as when we use it. So really think about, you know, a lot of times we think that assessments have to be these long, big deal, you know, sort of processes and things like that, when in reality, a 5-question survey can be more powerful and helpful to you than a 100-question questionnaire or, you know, this big, huge rubric that we use and all of that. You know, I used to work for a gentleman who his favorite saying was, you teach a little bit and then you test a little bit. And, you know, that's always stuck with me because I think he was right. So when you're thinking about your PLC and deciding if it's effective or not, spend a little bit of time, do some work, and then do a quick, formative kind of assessment on how effective the team is. And it can be, like I said, simple, 5 questions. It could be looking at 3 data points. It doesn't always have to be this big, long, drawn-out process for us to know where we are. The other critical thing is when you gather data, it's not just sharing that data, discussing it, breaking it down. It's also how you use that data to impact the way your organization and your PLC is running. So again, data is great, but if we don't do anything with that data, then we're really sunk. I don't know how many of you guys are familiar with the work of Paul Bambrick, or Paul Santoyo Bambrick is his actual name. He's written a couple of books. One that he's really well known for is called Driven by Data. Another one is Data-Driven Instruction. And one of the things that he talks a lot about in that book is that, you know, if we really dig down and we use our data to guide our teaching, we will see tremendous student achievement results. The same is true with your PLC. If, you know, your PLC, you know, looks like it's working, but you get data that maybe not all the team members are bought in, or that people are still unsure if we're really working towards the same goals, or they can't even articulate the goals, you have to act upon that data. So be very, very careful. What you collect must be acted on. If you're not going to act on it, don't collect it. Okay? So if you're also thinking about just kind of a whole course in general, what would you say it would be some critical kinds of activities and work that an effective PLC should be engaged in? And this should be easy. We've talked about this, it feels like 100 times.
Observations.
I'm sorry, what?
Peer observation.
Yep, absolutely. Peer observation. One of the most important things you can do. You know, that was the big piece of the discussion forum for the last week. How we do peer observations effectively. You know, we can have great plans, but if they're not being implemented appropriately and effectively in the classroom, then those plans are worthless. They're just the paper they're written on. It's really all about implementation. Okay, what else should you be doing in those meetings?
Meaningful training to help train. We talk about, you know, play to your weak or play to your strengths, but you need to build on your weaknesses, and oftentimes that means some legitimate, you know, training that's going to help do that.
Yeah, I think I read in somebody's reply, somebody's forum, I replied to what they posted. We were doing peer observations pretty regularly when I was still in the schools. And one of the things that we knew about our data, because we'd really dug into the student data and gotten it down to the objective level, was that our kids weren't doing very well in vocabulary. And we couldn't figure out why. We thought we were doing all this vocabulary work and stuff like that. So we started doing classroom observations and peer observations. And when you do those, you want to focus on one thing. Don't, maybe two, but I would never go more than two. And so the focus of our classroom observations and our walks, our learning walks, was vocabulary. Well, it didn't take us very long to go to very many classrooms until we realized why our students were not doing well on vocabulary, particularly in a standardized test situation. Nobody in my high school knew how to teach vocabulary. They were doing things that we all know are not terribly effective, like here's your list of words on Monday. So Tuesday night your homework is go home and define them. Wednesday, use them in a sentence. Thursday, write them 3 times. And then Friday, I'm going to quiz you on them. And lo and behold, we were just shocked that kids weren't remembering all these vocabulary words. So we used that information not to, it was no fault of our teachers. We had not done the right kind of professional development for them. So we decided to pull in the work of Robert Marzano and Deborah Pickering, about teaching academic vocabulary. And we taught everybody a strategy to use to effectively teach vocabulary. And it was really kind of amazing when we equipped our teachers with that. We did several other things too. It wasn't just one strategy. But through the PLC, we saw the need. Our classroom observations validated what the problem was exactly. And that did become our professional development. And actually became our professional development strand for the rest of that particular school year. And we were very, very pleased. We saw a 30-point gain in a single year in how well our kids were doing on vocabulary because we really paid attention to it. I know you guys are students, so you probably don't have just lots of time for fun reading, but if you do have the chance, I would also encourage you, if you're thinking about learning walks, there are 2 people that are my go-to gurus in this area. Dr. Lynn Resnick at the University of Pittsburgh. She has a wonderful program and process called Learning Walks that is really, really great for PLCs to use. The other guru person that I go to is Richard Elmore. He is a Harvard professor, and he has written a book called Instructional Rounds. And what he has done is he's taken the idea of peer observations and modeled it for education, much like they do medical rounds. So, if you've ever been in a hospital or, watched TV or whatever, and, the residents are following the chief resident or the doctor, whoever they follow, around, and, they look at a patient, and they look at the symptoms, and they look at the records, and then they have this big, huge dialogue about what's going on. Well, instructional rounds are very much like that, that you work together as a team, you do observations, and then as a group, you narrow down and identify the problem, and then you can lead that into, is it professional development we need? Is it just this particular teacher needs more support? Is it that, the strategies we're using are just not effective? But they're both really great resources and tools that I would encourage you to think about. I know as I left Dallas, they were going to be moving wholeheartedly, full force. We've been doing learning walks for several years, but they were moving more into that instructional rounds process. So like I said, it's a great protocol and really very helpful. And I'll try to find, I was very fortunate, I got to study with Dr. Elmore at Harvard a couple summers ago. And so I'll try to find some of the resources from way back then and post them for you guys, so you can download that kind of stuff. Okay. All right, so we've talked about peer observations. We've talked about a couple other things. What else should you be doing in those PLCs that are effective? What are some effective practices?
How about what we've done? Well, what we've worked on today, I can share that.
Okay.
We actually did role played on how to deliver our objective to our students to ensure that they understand what they will be doing. It changed so much because now instead of saying by the end of the unit or by the end of the lesson, the student will be able to, but now we have to say, I can, and then you have to put your verb, demonstrate, explain, like that. Then you have to ask yourself, what do you want them to explain? And then you have to tell what the product is. So we actually had to, we were paired up in groups. We went to the, got some, I can't think of the paper, the paper that you put on the wall. I can't think of it right now. But we actually were in groups and we had to write our objective out and we had to role play with each other. Then we role played in the actual meeting, in the actual PLC meeting. And it really made sense. It was really nice, good experience.
Yeah, thanks, LaFay. That is one of the greatest things you can do in a PLC is try things out. Because PLCs are for student learning. That's certainly what our objectives are, but we also want to make sure we're learning as teachers. I'm sure you guys have had this experience. You go to this professional development and you sit all day and you listen to an expert and you're like, oh, that's great and wonderful. And then you go back to your classroom and you absolutely do not change a thing. You just keep doing what you've always done. The best kind of professional development is exactly what LaFay described. It is in the moment, stuff that you can practice and role play and you can make mistakes and you can perfect it and you can get it right so that when you walk into your classroom the next time, you're able to deliver that. So a huge part of an effective PLC is all about development and learning for teachers and for the membership of that group. So it goes beyond just, focusing on what we're doing for students. It's helping us to become better at our craft. That's very, very essential, but it also, I know for me, as a teacher, the more that I can practice something, the better I feel about, presenting it and having it go well with my students. Okay. Other ideas or thoughts? What else should you be doing in those PLCs?
Well, one thing, I'm at one of those schools that really doesn't do PLCs correctly.
Yeah.
So my team, as in just us 3 kindergarten teachers, when we meet with our PLCs, it's more housekeeping. They give us the information, they give us the data, we talk for a minute and we go along our way. So what I've been trying to do is just invite the other 2 to come to my room, and I'll just text them in the morning and I'll say, at PE time, I'm going to be putting together my guided reading binder because we're starting next week. At PE time, I'm going to be doing this. Would you like to join me? And they've been joining me, and we've been doing things better together. And so that's what we did today is we're starting to put together our guided reading binder. So I pulled out mine and a couple of other ones pulled out theirs, and we shared the stuff that we liked and decided how we were going to set it up, and we set up our binder and it's ready to go for next week.
That's awesome. Yeah, curriculum planning, unit planning, lesson planning, all of those things should be occurring in PLCs. Lesson planning is a laborious, not very fun task. I know that, but it's also a critically important task. So Anne-Marie, that's awesome that, you kind of started in formal PLC, and, I would encourage you to keep it up because that will make a huge difference. Okay. Any other thoughts or ideas? Okay, so we are at the end of the course. What do you want to know? What questions do you have? Let me talk you through the final exam real quickly. It's pretty simple. I think there are 10 questions that I posted for you. You have 3 options on how you want to deliver that information to me. You can do a PowerPoint presentation. You can do a video, or you can write a more formal paper. If you choose to write a paper, I am not looking for a dissertation. Please do not make it more than 3 to 5 pages long. Like I said, at this point, I have a pretty good sense of what you know and what you don't know. And so for me, this is just a way to kind of wrap it all up. And honestly, to get some feedback from you guys because, I want to get better and better at this, as well. Online teaching is still a little bit of challenge. For me, it's different. But I do want to hear back from you guys. If you decide to do a PowerPoint, you don't have to narrate it. Just make it clear. And again, no more, absolute maximum is 10 slides. If you really want to do something fun, do a video. But again, no more than 10 to 15 minutes. And that doesn't seem like very long, but if you've ever made a video, that's like a lifetime coming up with 10 or 15 minutes of content. And, don't forget too, it's a little bit different this week. Normally we end everything on a Sunday, but the class actually officially ends on Saturday. And so I grade all day Sunday, and we'll have your grades posted then by Monday for you. Also too, Moodle is still a little weird. Like I went through today and graded some things, and I went back to check the grade book, and it was like they weren't there. So I think I'm caught up with everything for everybody, but if you notice anything missing, just email me or text me, and I'll go back in and double check. Because they're like I said, I put stuff in and I don't know where it goes sometimes, but hopefully we'll get everything together, and I think you guys have done a great job, so you should be fairly happy with the outcomes. At least I hope so. So what else do you guys want to know? Questions, comments, concerns? Sorry, I'm looking at what my dog's doing. I don't know what she's doing over there.
If I was to become a principal of a school that had never had professional learning communities, and what do you think that like the first step to like gain the buy-in from staff to like really take it on with fidelity?
Joseph, I've been in that situation, where I went to a school as principal where they literally were just kind of islands, each individual was. So the first thing that we did what I call a plus delta activity, and it's just very simple: what's working, what's not working. And we listed all those things out, and I can almost guarantee one of the things they're going to say is that we work in isolation, or that we don't have enough support, and we don't communicate, we don't know what's going on. I mean, those are always kind of the deltas or the negative stuff. Then from there, I used a nominal group technique, which I don't know if you guys are familiar with or not, but we list all the problems, and then everybody's given a sticky note, and they number let's say that you've got 10 problems. So they would number each sticky note 1 to 10. And everybody goes and posts their, the number one sticky note goes by the thing they think's the most pressing for you to have to work on. And so everybody does that. They post their sticky notes, and then you add up the totals, and the ones with the lowest number became our priorities. So then once we'd identified what those were our most immediate needs to work on as a campus and as a school, then we started doing lots of team building, and I always did book studies. I'm a big believer in book studies or articles. Sometimes people don't want to do a whole book, but we would do an article. And I used the 5 dysfunctions of a team book to kind of get this kicked off and introduced. For one thing, it's a pretty easy read. It reads more like a story than it does a textbook, so people tend to buy into that. And then I started just sharing exemplars of, this school did this and this school did that. And I bring in articles and research and things like that. And we would do sort of a big group study. Then the other part of it too is I believe you can create an organizational structure as a principal. So I deliberately created groups, and every teacher in my building had to be a part of some kind of a group. And we started doing PLCs. We just didn't call them PLCs till way later on. But, you've got to build that foundation first, and getting buy-in is really important. But, once they identify their own problems and they get to help prioritize what you're going to work on, then, it kind of flows from there, if that makes sense. Okay. What other questions, guys?
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
At the beginning of this year, we have transitioned from PLCs to cluster. We are a TAP school now. So how do you deal with that? I mean, because I know like in TAP, you constantly having people in your room, constantly. Like now we are about to, like, the mentor teachers and the master teacher, they're actually going to do like a walkthrough, and they actually gave us folders by content. Mm-hmm. Everybody in the same content have the same color folder. So now when they come in, they're supposed to be supporting you. They leave feedback about what you did in your walkthrough, and then you have to write what you thought about the feedback that they gave you during your walkthrough. And I'm so nervous about people just constantly in my room. I've had my evaluation already, but now I have to have 2 more unannounced. So the people coming in between is like, oh man. So how do you transition from PLC to like cluster? It's way more intense. Like it's a lot more to do.
Yeah, it is, LaFay. And honestly, I guess my gut reaction is it seems to me like they're going backwards. Because PLCs have proven over time, and they, you guys, some of you may notice that our textbook's fairly old. It's from 2002, but when you find something that works, you stick with it. So, kind of like I think it was Anne Marie's doing, I would still continue with PLCs, but I would do it informally so that you're helping and supporting each other. And the same thing's true about the feedback that they give you. I used to do, honestly, myself and my administrators, we each did 10 walkthroughs a week. So our teachers were seen constantly by somebody. So there was 8 of us. It was a very large school. So everybody was seen literally like every other week. And we always did written feedback, but, it's awfully hard. Quite honestly, that for me to sit down and talk to you about what I saw or here's what I wrote and for you to really understand what I meant. So what we did was we transferred in from those observations of written feedback to what we called coaching in the moment, because I'm a huge believer in the power of coaching. And so what we started doing, and our teachers actually came up with this, and it was really helpful. They're like, instead of writing it down, step in the middle of my lesson and show me what you want me to do. And it kind of became this ebb and flow between, an administrator, the teacher's teaching, and we'd step in and we would show them a particular technique or something we wanted them to do. Then we would just kind of step back out and the teacher could try it with us there watching them. And we would do that, and we found that moved our teachers much quicker than the written feedback. Because they give you a piece of paper, but I bet you they never come back and sit down with you and talk about it. Or do they role model it for you? Or do they do a lesson for you? Or do they even sit there and, do a role play with you? Otherwise, because quite frankly, written feedback, unless it's evaluative and it goes toward your evaluation, it's really kind of useless to you. So I would just maybe talk to those teachers that are coming in and doing the observations and stuff and say, hey, and, in addition, because I know you got to do your paperwork, I get that, but you just step in and show me what you're talking about. And we developed hand signals with our teachers too. So if they were doing something great, we just gave them a thumbs up. Or we also did some really silly things. We just would take a sticky note, we put a star or a happy face on it, and every time the teacher, like let's say we were trying, a big push for us was formative assessment. So every time we would see the teachers do formative assessment really well, we would just take that little sticky note and stick it on their board. And these are mean old jaded high school teachers. You wouldn't think it made a big deal. Well, the next thing I know, they're like collecting these sticky notes like they're gold or something. But the more immediate feedback you get in the moments of teaching, the better off you're going to be. My other suggestion would be to see if maybe they'd be willing to videotape, if you're willing, I guess, too, videotape you teaching. And then you guys sit down together after the observation and watch the videotape together so that they can show you and tell you, okay, right here, you did this really, really well, but, maybe here you should have done this kind of thing. But yeah, I wouldn't let PLCs go completely. I really wouldn't.
I was in a TAP school, and that was my first fear when we started the clusters. But we went out of our way to make sure that we had at least a PLC once a week, and it was the most meaningful time because it was our time, and it wasn't information dump or data dump. It was because we're talking about students. We're talking about what's going on with them and what's things that we can do to, attorney talks. I can remember that I could never get them to work well. And so one of my co-teachers says, let me just show you how we do it. And it was just eye-opening. It's like, dang, that seems too simple. But they wouldn't do that in the cluster, but we were able to do that in our PLC.
Right. Yeah. And thank you for that, Jim, because I absolutely agree. I would never, ever just let, PLC go. Whether it's as a principal or even as a teacher. Like I said, there's too much value in those. So I'm trying to read. Okay, so somebody wants to know, what is a cluster? So LaFay, Jim, you guys want to explain?
Be careful how you use the word. It's all I know. In
Yeah.
our case, a cluster was, we had 2 teams of 6th grade teachers that were taught all subjects. We had a master teacher that was responsible for the whole 6th grade. As they were in and out of classrooms, they oftentimes would see a common problem or a common opportunity. So they would bring into us new strategies or new ideas just to try to, again, affect change in the classroom, positively with the students. So we may, they may give us something on Monday and say, okay, by the end of the week, try this at least 2 times in your classes. And then next Monday when we get together, let's talk about how it worked. And so there's, it should be meaningful, and it should be, again, I was always hesitant because I'm not going to master a skill in 4 days.
Yeah.
And I'm liable to not even buy into the skill for 4 days until I do my own little research or whatever. But at least if they came in and saw me doing the skill, and then they found out for themselves, oh, gee, that doesn't work in this particular case. I'm a math teacher. And so doing a really good reading strategy in math is just not going to be beneficial. So that's what our cluster was. And sometimes it was a cluster.
Yeah, thank you. That's a great explanation. Some places call them smaller learning communities. Some places will call them teams. But basically, it's the idea of a group, and generally it's going to be your core teachers, share a group of students. So instead of, if you think about a traditional middle school or high school where kids, they just kind of go randomly everywhere for their subjects, you have a cohort of kids who go from, the English, the math, the science, and the social studies. Those kids are all in the same classes together with the same teachers. It was really, really popular back probably about 2000 to maybe 2004 or 5. Lots of money came to schools to implement those. Pretty effective, quite honestly. It is a nightmare to schedule, though. But, I agree with Jim. People can give you all these great ideas. But, it's kind of like, if you think of the teaching cycle and you really simplify it down to I do, well, I gotta get this right here. So we do it together. So it's we do, then it's you do. So, they watch somebody else do it, and then I do, which is the student does it independently. Same's true for teachers, guys. They need to show you. I'm not a big one for just giving a strategy to somebody. I need to show you how to use that strategy. And that's why PLCs are so important. And like LaFay said, they hear their role modeling and they're playing, role playing and all that kind of stuff helps tremendously, because it's a whole lot easier to understand how a teaching strategy works in action than it is for me just to give you a piece of paper or write it down.
Tracy, I had a question that kind of relates to that. My experience has been in the middle school and high school grades, and we weren't, a cluster type schools at any of the ones that I taught. And I just think, like, when I taught, I would teach like 6th and 7th grade math, and I would teach 8th grade social studies. So I would have this crazy schedule with sections everywhere. And so, I guess the first part of that, would I be a member of 3 different PLCs if that was the case, if I was teaching 3 different things like that? And then, I mean, do we just wear our counselors out with trying to schedule that around to a point to where, like, I would actually have a common time within the school day? Because that's one of the things I was reading in the Floor and Eaker book was, make sure and build that into the school day schedule that we had time to meet. And I'm just thinking of, like, the logistical nightmare that might present when you have teachers who are teaching, multiple grade levels or multiple subjects within the same school. And it's not like nobody's taking math right now,
Yeah.
So how do you overcome that at the secondary level?
And like Justify, most of my experience was honestly high school. I got out of middle school as fast as I could after 3 years. That was, like my sentence was over kind of thing. God bless you, middle school people. But those little hormones on feet were just too much for me. what we had to do, quite honestly, that's why we went to the teaming concept, and we teamed all of our 9th graders, and then that worked so well for us, we ended up teaming all of our 10th graders, because not only did we want teachers to be in PLCs by content, so if you were a math teacher, we did our PLCs, our content PLCs before or after school. And then for our teams, they had a common planning period, and that was what they did during the day was, basically because everybody had, you have 4 or 5 teachers who have this group of students, and that's when they would plan for intervention, enrichment, talk about discipline issues. We'd bring parents in, those kind of things. The bigger, believe it or not, the bigger your school is, the easier it is to schedule stuff like that. I went from a school of 3,000 as principal, so that was pretty easy, quite honestly, for us to do. But when I went to a small school that initially I had 600, and we eventually we were growing the enrollment, it was a nightmare. So I just
run out of places to put the kids.
Right, exactly. Yeah, and on top of that, I swear, if you've ever done master scheduling, everything was a singleton. I mean, literally everything was a singleton. It was really hard to schedule because a class was only offered one time, kind of thing. So what we ended up doing is I talked to my teachers, and we decided that we literally could not make our master schedule work to have a common planning time. So we instead did common lunch times, and we did what we called a flex lunch schedule, so that once a week the teachers would get their 30 minutes of duty-free lunch, then they would get another 30 minutes tacked onto that for team planning. So we could give everybody the same lunch, but we could, and we did it through using an advisory and study skills program to give those 30 minutes. And we just grouped kids according to need during that extra 30 minutes of flex time. And like I said, it worked pretty well for us. But it's hard, but once you kind of figure out the schedule and how to do that, you need somebody who's really good at master scheduling. Luckily I managed to find people on my staff who were really, really good at that. But it was so worth it. The other thing that I know that several schools were doing in Dallas, my last year there, was they got waivers from the state. So once every 6 weeks, their kids went home half a day early. So, and then they did nothing but PLC meetings and stuff in that entire half afternoon. The other thing I would encourage you to do if you're in a leadership position and you can influence these kind of things, we quit doing professional development the way that people think of professional development, where, the whole staff meets together in the cafeteria, the auditorium, or wherever you meet. And, the principal and the APs talk to you for all day, and, woohoo, that's a lot of fun. Our professional development days we did nothing but either team building or PLCs. So we kind of grabbed every moment we could to do that. But, it's hard. Time is a big barrier. But, I would encourage you to get creative, whether it's, like I said, getting waivers from your parish or your district or from the state for additional release time, using all your available professional development time. And then I just made deals with my teachers. We would do early morning meetings or late afternoon meetings, and then everybody on Friday got to leave. My only thing was you can't run over the kids in the parking lot because the teachers left at the same time. I also, too, would bring in substitutes once every month, and those subs would cover classes for the teachers so they could have a whole day of planning together for PLCs. So like I said, you just kind of have to get creative and think out of the box, but there's a lot of different ways to do it. Yeah. Yeah, so I see what Anne-Marie just posted about, hiring subs and extended PE time. We also would do things like if we had a big school event, whether it was an assembly or something like that, I can handle an assembly. I don't need all my teachers in there to corral the kids. So it's like, okay, you guys have an hour. This is your PLC time this week because I've got the kids in this program or assembly or whatever we were doing. Pep rallies also.
Those are all really cool ideas. Thanks.
Sure. Any other questions, guys? Okay, well, y'all are getting me off easy. So do read the chat comments if you haven't. There's some really good ideas in here from, lots of people. So thank you guys. But I guess this is the last time I'll see you in person, unless you're going to be in, it looks like I'm teaching EDL 710 this next session. And then I think, this is all subject to change, of course, that I'll be doing the EDL 707 classes too from now on. So hopefully I get to see you guys again in class. But if you've already had those, thank you. I've loved getting to know all of you. And, I know most of you too through advisement and hopefully through graduation and stuff like that. But, you guys just make me better every time because I learned so much from you. So thank you guys. I know you're going to ace that final exam. And it has been my honor and pleasure to get to spend some time with you. Thank you guys. I'm letting you go early
Dr. Tracy.
All right, thank you. Y'all have a great rest of the night and semester. And like I said, maybe I'll see some of y'all soon.
Thank you.
All right,
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.